This episode of Hungry for Wisdom is dedicated to my boy Ben Van Noy down there at bensbibles.org. If you guys need a Bible recovered in some good leather work, send it down to him. My childhood Bible that, I got saved reading this thing. I've taken it all over the world with me, planted churches with it. I love this Bible, and it was falling apart, and it was breaking my heart, man, because I was like, I don't want to be done with this thing. So I sent it down to him. I said, please, can you resurrect my Bible? And he put some work into this thing, and the leather on it is just gorgeous. I'm telling you, this guy is the real deal, and he is an artist. So if you need a Bible recovered, you need some leather put on there, and this thing will last you the rest of your life. You pass it down to your great grandkids. Check out bensbibles.org. He's not paying me to say this. I just love this Bible that he just sent back to me. So, all right, Ben, man, this one's for you, and everybody else, let's do it. Welcome to Hungry for Wisdom. This is the podcast for people who want to know what God knows. He hasn't told us everything, but man, he has told us a lot. I'm Dustin, pastor at Grace and Truth. If you want to know what God knows, let's dig in. On today's episode of Hungry for Wisdom, we've got a real blast from the past, not like last time. We've got a present from Dad that ends up being a Messiah, and of course, aliens. It's episode 2. Turn it up!
Here we go!
All right, guys, for today's Proverbs devotion, we're going to give you kind of the second half of Solomon's biography as it pertains to us, because there are things to learn from Solomon's life that kind of give meaning to everything that he wrote thereafter. And the big thing that I want to pay attention to today is that the gift that Solomon is to all of us, all of that was actually a gift to him. He inherited everything that he passed on to us. He is a recipient of grace. The life of Solomon just oozes with these gospel themes. And so, of course, we saw in episode 1 that Solomon was the wisest man ever to show up until Jesus Christ himself showed up. And of course, Jesus is in a bit of a different category, being God in the flesh. He was speaking the wisdom of God to us, since he was the wisdom of God incarnate, as it says in 1 Corinthians 1 to us. But Solomon was given wisdom like nobody else before him, or other than Jesus, since him. And he wrote it all down, or so much of it down in the Bible, that we get to benefit from it. But the way that he got so wise wasn't just by reading books. He read books like after he was given the gift of wisdom, and he increased in learning. But all this information he added to himself was being added into a mind and a heart that had the wisdom to use it, right? And that's the definition of wisdom in a lot of ways. It's living skillfully in the fear of the Lord. I didn't come up with that. Somebody else did. But, it's a great definition of wisdom, to live skillfully in the fear of the Lord. Or you could say to live skillfully in the knowledge of God. So you take in information, you use it in an advantageous way, and you always know that God is in every room that you're in, looking at every decision that you make, and has an opinion about what you're doing. That's wisdom, man. It's to navigate life skillfully in the fear of the Lord. Okay, God's voice is primary. His decision is the final one, and he has the loudest voice in any conversation. Okay, so as Solomon's going about this, the way that he got the wisdom that he was using was given to him by God, but it was given to him on the basis of stuff that his dad had done. You see, these gifts were not earned by him; they were earned for him. Right. So I'm going to read you something from 2 Samuel. Chapter 7, and this is based on this is a story about Solomon's dad, David. Now, the background of this story in 2 Samuel 7 is that David had a lot of prosperity by this point, right? God put him in place, and he cleared out Israel's enemies, fought all of those battles and won, and there were all these trade agreements that had taken place. Israel was just loaded. I mean, the gold was flowing around there. And so David says, yeah, something's off here, man. I'm living in this palace. I'm living in this temple, and we've still got a tabernacle, which is like a portable temple. So God's living in a tent over there. God's a nomad, and I'm sitting here safe and secure in this lush palace. Something's off here. I'm going to build God a house because I love the Lord. I'm going to build him a house. So let me read you 2 Samuel 7, verses 1 through 16. It came about when the king lived in his house, and Yahweh had given him rest on every side from all his enemies, that the king said to Nathan the prophet, "See now, I dwell in a house of cedar, but the ark of God dwells within tent curtains." Nathan said to the king, Go do what is in your mind, for Yahweh is with you. But in the same night, the word of Yahweh came to Nathan, saying, Go and say to my servant David, Thus says Yahweh, Are you the one who should build me a house to dwell in? For I have not dwelt in a house since the day I brought up the sons of Israel from Egypt, even to this day. But I have been moving about in a tent, even in a tabernacle. Wherever I have gone with all the sons of Israel, did I speak a word with one of the tribes of Israel, which I commanded to shepherd my people Israel, saying, Why have you not built me a cedar house? In other words, what God is saying there is, listen, I've been in a tabernacle this whole time. You ain't heard me complaining about it. Thanks for your idea to build me a house. But, if I want something done, David, I'll go ahead and get it done, little buddy. It's okay. So verse 8, he says, Now therefore, you shall say to my servant David, he's talking to the prophet Nathan, go say to David, Thus says Yahweh of hosts, I took you from the pasture, from following the sheep, to be a ruler over my people Israel. I have been with you wherever you have gone, and have cut off all your enemies from before you. And I will make you a great name, like the names of the great men who are on the earth. I will also appoint a place for my people Israel, and will plant them, that they may live in their own place and not be disturbed again, nor will the wicked afflict them any more as formerly, even from the day that I commanded judges to be over my people Israel, and I will give you rest from all your enemies. Yahweh also declares to you that Yahweh will make a house for you. When your days are complete and you lie down with your fathers, I will raise up your descendant after you, who will come forth from you, and I will establish his kingdom, and he will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be a father to him, and he will be a son to me. When he commits iniquity, I will correct him with the rod of men and with the strokes of the sons of men, but my loving kindness will not depart from him, as I took it away from Saul, whom I removed from before you. Saul was the first king of Israel that David took over for. Lastly, he says, Your house and your kingdom shall endure before me forever, and your throne shall be established forever. Do you guys see what just happened there? David was like, God, I'm going to build you a house. He says, no, I'm going to build you a house. And in fact, that house is not just going to be a physical house. You've already got that. That's fine. That house is going to be a lineage. The house of David will be a family name that's going to sit on the royal throne forever. In other words, he's saying, I'm going to dump so much blessing on you, David, that it's going to take multiple generations. It's going to take an eternal number of generations just to fit all of the blessings that I'm going to give to you. Now, what would your reaction be if you went to God and said, God, I want to serve you? And God Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to serve you. And you cannot imagine what I'm going to give to you. Your kids are going to be rulers. I'll bless them. When they mess up, I'll discipline them, but I'm always going to love them. I mean, look, I'm a parent, guys, and a lot of you guys are parents, and we worry about our kids, right? Like, that's a scary thing to think about how your kids are going to turn out. And granted, a lot of David's kids turned out to be idiots, but what a great assurance it would be to say, I will be paying attention to your son. Like, that's all we ask God for. And so he gives him this, and he says, your kids are going to rule, right? Your son will rule, and this lineage from you will rule over Israel and be blessed. Now, what happened then was that Solomon was born and took over for his dad, David. And so Solomon inherits these blessings. So when Solomon goes to God in 1 Kings 3, which we saw in episode 1, and he says, God, I need wisdom in order to handle these blessings that you've given me, right? How am I going to rule this people? I'm a little kid. I don't know how to go out. I don't know how to come in. I need wisdom because otherwise these blessings that you've given me are going to become a curse. And God says, all right, here's your wisdom. So everything that Solomon had, he asked for, right? Do you hear the gospel themes echoing here already? We are saved not by our works, but by grace. The gift of God of salvation is delivered to us at the expense of Jesus Christ, and not at our own expense. In the same way, Solomon received these gifts that were purchased for him by his dad. His dad went to war. His dad fought the battles. His dad had to, butt heads with the Philistines his whole, reign. It was by grace, not by works, that he received all these blessings from God, even eternal blessings. So Solomon takes over, on the throne, And of course, if you've read the stories as they unfolded, then Solomon's son Rehoboam was a total moron. I mean, this guy's head was made of shoe leather. He was an idiot, right? So he, in fact, if there's kids around, you may want to fast forward this part. He took over for Solomon on the throne, and people kind of came to him and said, "Hey, Rehoboam, your dad, I mean, he was great, right? Like, Solomon's awesome, but man, he taxed us a lot, and we're really hoping that we could get a reprieve on these taxes so we can, like, eat and, like, feed our families. And so, hey, why don't you go easy on the taxes, huh?" And all of the wise elders, the advisors, they were saying, "Yeah, Rehoboam, go ahead and do that." Rehoboam, son of Solomon, grandson of David, says, "Oh, you guys thought my dad was harsh? Okay, watch this. I'm a real man," right? He's got like little man syndrome. I think he was probably about 5'1", probably just about as wide as he was tall. I think that was probably Rehoboam. And I think he probably had a really high voice too. He's like, "I am the man. I am the king. And if you thought that my dad was harsh on you, you should see me because I'm strong and people like me." That's how I picture Rehoboam. But what he said was, "Hey, you think my dad was tough?" He says, my little finger is bigger than my dad's penis. How about that?" And like, you got to imagine, the guys in the court must have looked at him and like one eyebrow goes down and the other one goes up, and it's just like, bro, why would you say something like that? What a weird way of thinking. So anyway, that was Rehoboam. He ends up splitting the kingdom because he's a dork. So it didn't, a lot of the blessings and especially the wisdom didn't last very long. And so the question comes up, well, how is it then that God kept his promise to Solomon, right? I mean, he says to David, "You will always have a son to sit on the throne." And within one generation after David's son, the throne is compromised, split in half. Now you got the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. This is a mess. Then both of them get taken into exile. The Assyrians take the north, the Babylonians take the south. There's nobody sitting on the throne of Israel anymore. So in what sense did God keep his promise? Well, along comes this kid named Jesus, right? And if you read the beginning of Luke just harps on this over and over again. He's like, look, here's the lineage back to David. And here's all these references from these prophets that were prophesying over the baby Jesus back to David and Mary and Simeon. These guys are all claiming promises centering around Jesus that God made to David. And so now here's Jesus, the King of Israel, the King of God's people, and his kingdom endures forever. He fulfills Psalm 2 where, God says, "You are my son. Ask of me and I will give you the nations. Your kingdom is an everlasting kingdom which will not fade away." Daniel 7, all this stuff. So all these promises that God makes to David they end up being fulfilled in Jesus, and his reign lasts forever. So God is proved to be true, even though a lot of people would have called him a liar there for a few hundred years. He's patient. He can handle it, So Solomon winds up inheriting all of this stuff. And, it's an interesting thing to contemplate what we have that we have asked for but not deserved, right? I mean, Paul says this to the church. He says, what is that? 1 Corinthians 4, I think. He says, "What do you have that you have not received?" That's an interesting question. I mean, we work, right? We go to work and we get paychecks. And so when we put food on the table for our families, we can say, yes, I have earned that. I deserve that. But of course, we went to work on a day that God decided to give us life and loan it to us. We didn't earn that. We didn't earn our birth. That happened. God gave us gifts before we could ever earn them. So anything that we do to earn something, we're just maximizing on something that God has already given us. And that's good, but it also means that we don't get to claim ultimate credit for any of this stuff. So what do we have, like Solomon, that is a gift from God, where we stand on the shoulders of previous generations of Christians or of our family or whatever, and we need to give a lot of thanks to a lot of people before we can rightly appreciate this stuff. The reason I bring all of this up before, on episode 3, we're going to get into just, Proverbs 1. Here you go. But the reason I bring all this up before we even do that is because I hope that when you're listening to episode 3, you listen back to this and think, you know what? I can't appreciate, let alone use this wisdom unless I understand where it came from. What's the source of wisdom? Well, of course, God is the source of all knowledge and of all wisdom, but he delivers that through human sources that we need to look back and say thank you for. We all stand on somebody's shoulders. We all stand downstream from somebody and drink from the river that was set into motion by somebody else's work, right? This is one of the reasons that God tells us, look, honor your father and mother. It doesn't say honor them if they were good. It says honor them, right? Because in the end, they gave you stuff that you're probably never going to know about. They had to fight battles that you may not be aware of. And so you honor them for the unknown, if nothing else. And then you certainly honor them for the known. Somebody, these days it's common, I'm recording this in 2021, right? So these days it's common to tell certain racial groups, and not just in America, but I mean, you hear this all over the place, for different racial groups, that those that have been dominant for a long time in the culture, they have privilege. This is an idea that's catching on globally now. And the term renounce your privilege is gaining some traction. And, I got to wonder, is it possible to renounce your privilege without breaking the fifth commandment to honor your father? I mean, I guess I don't really know the answer to that, but it's worth considering. It's probably worth debating even. I'm not really sure what the answer would be. But it seems to me that if you're going to say, listen, I stand downstream from a lot of hard work, a lot of sacrifice, a lot of blessing, and I'm going to renounce all of that multi-generational investment in me, that would be dishonoring to your parents, right? Now, of course, if something was delivered to you by way of injustice, you should renounce it, and you should go back and undo the evil work that was done insofar as you have the ability. But, nobody stands by themselves, and nobody is an island either in this life or historically. And so we see this when we look at Solomon. And if we try and recreate everything in our own generations, and I'm speaking mostly to millennials, like, look, I'm 34, man. I'm one of you guys, and our generation is stupid. We think that we can just recreate everything and start over and clean the slate and, redefine words and invent things as we go. I'm telling you, man, it's not going to work. If you move the ancient boundary, you're going to find out why it was put there to begin with, and that lesson is going to hurt. And a lot of our forefathers already hurt for this stuff. Right? So we cut ourselves off from wisdom if we don't thank God for using our predecessors the way that he has. We don't have to repeat their mistakes, and it's okay to even acknowledge their mistakes and to call them out. That's fine. I'm down with all of that, right? But man, if we tear down all the statues, then we cut ourselves off from being able to learn the lessons. And then you'll read the book of Proverbs and not be able to do a thing with it. And you know what's going to happen there? If that takes place, you will be held responsible by God when you answer to him for rejecting the wisdom that he handed to you, because this came at quite a cost. You read the story of David. You read the story of Solomon. These guys suffered. Okay, this wisdom came to us at a cost. So I just want us to appreciate it. That's all I'm saying, right? So we will thank God for the wisdom that he has given. And we will thank him for the servants through which it was given. All right, guys. Now, with that being said, let's go get into the this is and that's. And today we're talking about aliens, because I get this question, like I've gotten it before, but it really in 2020 it sort of hit home because there was all this stuff about the naval pilots seeing UFOs and whatnot, which like the weirdest part of that story to me was how not weird it was in 2020. Because 2020 was such a strange year that it hits the news like, hey, we got footage from airplanes with UFOs. Like, these things literally are unidentified. We have no idea what this is. We're not aware of any aircraft that act that way. And so we have unidentified flying objects. But it didn't really gain supremacy in the news cycle because that, believe it or not, was the least weird thing that happened in 2020. Like, man, just reflecting on that is insane. What a crazy year that was. Anyway, so the question has come up before and then many times since then. Hey, if that's true, how are Christians supposed to think about this? Right? Does that mess with us at all? I mean, let me put it this way. Is it a problem for Christians if aliens are actually out there? Because it doesn't talk about them in the Bible. It talks about some weird people. I got some relatives I'm pretty sure are extraterrestrials, but in reality, I don't have any biblical instruction for creating a category in my mind for aliens. So what do you do? All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to assume for a second, or not assume, I'm going to pretend for a second that all of this has been totally substantiated and is totally clear. Yes, there are aliens. They have made contact. I don't really know what these stories are or what these UFOs end up being or any of that. I don't know. But let's go down this road for a minute and say, yeah, okay, aliens are a legit thing that we got to deal with now. How as Christians do we think about this stuff? Well, first thing I'm going to tell you is it doesn't mess with our Christianity at all. The fact that we would have questions is fine. I mean, we're Christians. We have questions, right? Ask God things. And sometimes he gives you an answer and sometimes not. Deuteronomy 29:29 says, look, the hidden things belong to the Lord, but the things that have been made known, that belongs to us and our children. Okay, so sometimes God doesn't tell us certain things, which is fine. It's like, it's okay. He's under no obligation to tell us what he did on the other side of the galaxy. And if it turns out that he was doing a whole lot of fun stuff over there that we knew nothing about, that would be no injustice on his part to have not told us. But the stuff that he has told us, we better teach to our kids, right? So the hidden things belong to the Lord. Fine. So it would not be any kind of problem theologically with our picture of God if it turned out there were aliens. Proverbs 25:2 says this, that it is the glory of God to conceal a matter, but it is the honor of kings to seek it out, right? Which means if God has hidden it, then he's kept something to himself for his own glory. Fine, fair game, no problem. But it's also good for us to ask the questions. Now, when we see something in the world that challenges our understanding of the Bible, okay, here's how I want us to categorize this. We are allowed to go back and say, okay, have I been reading my Bible correctly? Now, that's very important, right? Because what we're not going to do is we're not going to go and question the Bible. Because when a guy raises from the dead, what he says, that goes, right? Aliens or no aliens, the resurrection is a thing and the tomb is empty. That's it. So God gets the final word on all of this. But current events or scientific information or whatever, while it doesn't have the authority to override the Bible, it does have the authority to tell us, maybe I've read the Bible incorrectly. I've read it through my own lens, and I need to reevaluate my lens to account for new information. This happens all the time, right? Like, for example, this happened to me once when my understanding of Genesis, when God said, okay, that's it. Now man's days will be 120 years. That's it. My understanding was nobody could be older than 120 years old. Well, then, we got some story about some Russian lady that was like 147 or something. And I was like, really? Like, what do I do with that in the Bible? Now, it turns out it was really hard for them to substantiate her birth records, so maybe not. But it brought up an interesting question. If somebody lives to be 121 years old, then is my Bible wrong? Well, you could come to that conclusion if you were really itching to disbelieve God, or you could say, well, maybe I understood my Bible wrong. I should go back and reevaluate some stuff. Maybe I should learn something, because you know what we are, people? We're hungry for wisdom. Okay, so if aliens do actually exist, then, and if they're like here, they're upon us or whatever. I mean, I don't know. There's all sorts of stuff I don't know. So if that is the case, then what would that do for us theologically? Well, a couple of things, just maybe guidelines for thinking through this. Here are some questions that we should ask. Is there a gap in my Bible where they would fit? In other words, is there a place in my Bible where it hints at the life out there or whatever? The Bible doesn't give us any more information, but it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe that's where this part of God's creation would fit in the explanation of what he's given to us. So sometimes, things in the world, we don't see them in the Bible, but they are conspicuous by their absence. I just read a great little book. So it was almost a booklet, really. It was tiny, by a pastor in Idaho named Doug Wilson, and it was called Productivity, okay? And what he was saying was, the whole premise of the book was, how do you be productive? How do you squeeze the most out of a day and still rest and all of these things? And he had a really important point in there. He said, if you go to the Bible and you look for instructions on what to do with technology, you're not going to find them. Okay, because these guys were using rocks and they were using tools and they were using, bronze or whatever, metals. But the most advanced war weapon they had was a bow, pretty much, right? Or a sling. So you're not going to find how to handle an iPhone in the Bible unless you look in terms of what the Bible has to say about wealth. He says, take technology and just put it in the category of wealth. Think about what people 300 years ago, think about what George Washington would have had to do, who he would have had to hire in order to do things that your iPhone does for you. Okay? So he made this point. He said, I've got an app on my iPhone that reads me a story in a calm English accent as I go to sleep. George Washington would have had to hire somebody to do that, and that would have been a luxury of the rich. So he says, we take all of this technology and we categorize it as wealth. Okay. Now, the Bible's got all kinds of instruction as to what to do with technology and what a faithful disciple does with these things in his hands, right? I'm recording this podcast on all kinds of equipment here. Well, Wilson would say, consider that to be wealth. So, in other words, can I open up a category in my mind with the information that's in the Bible where I could process this information that I've never had to consider before? And the God's people, when they wrote the Bible, didn't have to consider. A lot of times that's the case. Okay. So is there a gap in my Bible where these things would fit? Also, other questions we would have to ask, these beings, these life forms, these aliens, right? Would they be moral beings or would they be just very advanced amoral beings? Not immoral, not, evil necessarily. Maybe, I don't know. But would they be amoral beings? Like a cheetah, a hamster, whatever, a tree. These things don't have moral culpability. So my question would be, what is the moral culpability of this intelligent life form over here? And then there are things to ask like that we probably know the answer to on some level. Is there an aspect of the image of God in which they are made? If so, then they would be part of fallen creation. And honestly, they'd probably be part of fallen creation anyway, just because, they exist. Ipso facto, they were created, right? So, do they have any kind of culpability in the fall? Is there any way in which that spread or that was shared or whatever? So does sin apply to them? And if sin does apply, how does the redemptive work for them? Jesus died to forgive the whole world, and Romans 8 says that he would be redeeming all of creation, and all of creation groans under the weight of the sin of Adam and Eve. So somehow Adam and Eve's sin would have spread to them, but how does redemption apply to them? You got to start asking questions like, okay, so did they have their own version of Moses? Did they have their own version of a covenant people? Did Jesus die on multiple planets? That's heresy, so that can't be the case, because the faith was once for all delivered to the saints, and when he said it was finished, I don't think he was limiting the scope of that to this ball of dirt, right? So, you got to start thinking in terms like this. You might think like, all right, 2 Peter 3, end time stuff, right? 2 Peter 3, he says that all of creation, the heavens and the earth, the stars and everything, they're going to melt as they burn. God is going to reform his creation on a molecular level. So that's going to cover, the aliens' backyard, wherever that would be from. What's it going to look like there? Do they get warnings about it? Do they get a chance to escape or not? So, these are questions that we would have to ask. And all of them, by the way, are fine questions to ask. There's no such thing as an evil question unless the Bible has already answered it and you're questioning the Bible's answer. But these things are, we're free to speculate on this kind of stuff. I don't know that it's fruitful. I don't know that you should spend a whole lot of time on it. But hey, if, the little bald greenie over there, green baldy, whatever you want to call him, if he starts showing up, these are the questions that are going to pop up. And these are the things that we would have to speculate on and maybe find some answers for. So look, here's the end of the matter on this one. Aliens, no problem for Christians. Big problem for humanity in terms of what we need to know and what we need to do with that information. But, it doesn't undo the work of the cross, doesn't undo the resurrection. It just opens up a whole lot of question marks, which personally I hope doesn't happen, because these are not questions. These are not problems I feel like having at this point in human existence. I feel like we got enough of them, and I'm ready for Jesus to just come back and hit the reset button on this whole bad boy. But if we do need to deal with that, it doesn't throw our walk with Christ off one bit. All right, guys, we'll see you on episode 3. Remember this: Jesus deserves disciples. Go be one.
Hungry for Wisdom is a ministry of Grace and Truth Community in West Richland, Washington. You can find out more about us on our app, social media, or at graceandtruthcommunity.com. We love him because he first loved us.